Data and the cloud, a marriage made in heaven or hell? Paul, over to you. Again, this is one of your topics.
Yeah, I mean, this really started when, probably over a year ago, I was looking at, various topics around data. And the one that sort of came up and bit me was that while cloud is effectively trying to design and develop stateless systems, the inherent contradiction is that data is inherently stateful. It has a state. It's not, and I know developers have got around it, in terms of the way Kubernetes has been used, and there's various, tricks and techniques to make sure that data at least looks stateless, but yeah. That's the challenge. So that's where it started from. You thought, well, okay, that's an interesting conundrum for putting data in the cloud, but a number of other things have come into play, and I suppose the two critical ones is one is latency, and the second one is data sovereignty.
Yeah.
And so the issues really around data sovereignty is sort of fairly straightforward to understand, and it's the fact that various countries do not want you to store your data anywhere outside their boundaries. And the cloud companies have developed regions and data centers in various geographies to get over that particular problem. So to an extent, it's gone away. The other is latency, but also the development of the Internet of Things, IoT, and very much where do you store data? How do you store data? Can data at the edge be in a cloud? All those sort of questions that says is it hell or is it heaven? I think it's in theory it ought to be heaven. You can just hand all your data over to a cloud provider, and it'll be more secure. You can access it, that everybody can access it. It's a single portal to get into it, all those sort of things. But the reality is, you've got to have a decent data architecture put together so you know where everything needs to be stored and why and for how long. And so much, the thing I've been finding as I have had to delve deeper and deeper into the sort of data world, is two things. Firstly, is the quality of the data we've got is lousy. People don't even know where it is, let alone data quality is poor, and that's a real blocker on things like AI. Are going to find that really difficult unless we get to grips with the quality of data, where it's stored, but also then having to work out what data do I actually need to keep. I mean, IoT, IoT could, never mind AI breaking the
internet.
The internet.
Yeah.
Moving data around could break the internet. And the other one literally was when I was looking at financial trading platforms, the way in which data has to be almost embedded in the technology, on site for the latency issues. You're getting, hence my interest in streaming analytics and how do you bring that in at low latency and all those sort of things. So I think, and what I noticed, if you look at both Google and AWS seem to be sort of quite prominent in it, is cool, is starting to promote the idea of a data cloud.
Right.
And, data cloud is really data management platforms, but run on Google Cloud or AWS or Azure, I presume. But there's a sort of inherent marketing position that says actually those data management platforms need to reside in the cloud for them to be effective, and I think that's wrong. Personally, I do not think that is an absolute given that they have to reside in a public cloud. Back to what we said right at the start of this, the cloud is IT and IT is the cloud. Everybody calls everything cloud, but I do actually put my foot down and say, is a data cloud the way you have to go, to make the data management platforms, to make data fabric or data mesh a reality today. And I don't think it is. And I'll fight for that. So to an extent, if we put everything into the cloud, and by that I mean into the public cloud,
Yeah.
it'll be nearer hell than heaven.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, I think, different ways this can go. So I think we need to be, first of all, clear. For me, we need to be clear about when we use the word data, what do we mean by data? And I don't mean like a definition of data, but what aspect of that whole data sort of piece that we're talking about. So whether it's kind of, where is the data stored, how's it managed, what platform do we use, how much of it do we retain, is it as you said, is it correctly labeled, is it the right type of data, is it cleansed, and so on, and and how do we secure it, how do we encrypt it, how do we put it in or manage it in a DR situation, and so on. So there's a number of different, and is it sovereign, and so on. So there's a number of different kind of parameters, if you like, to that. So, and I do agree with the point that you mentioned about stateless apps. Kubernetes started off, and it was kind of, yeah, everything's stateless. And it was like, no, it's not everything stateless. You have these little things called databases which you're going to have to cater for. And then they had to almost retrofit that ability into Kubernetes in order for it to be able to deal with stateful applications that we do need to keep our data, because that's what we're doing. We're transacting, or we need to store our previous state or something. So sorry, Kubernetes and the very enthusiastic open source community world and the CNCF or whatever, but business is going to bring you down to reality. Let's get down to business and let's get down to reality, kids. So yeah, I think that was quite correct. Sovereignty, I think, you and I covered. Latency, I think, as you said, you'd probably need it to be near to where the processing is happening as possible, or near to the point of storing it, near to the point of where it's being captured or streamed, which I think was your point of last time that we talked about in terms of data streaming. I think was quite interesting. I picked up a little bit more. I mean, we talked about cloud data management, remember, in the past. I think we had a conversation around that. I think that's still as relevant as ever, to be honest with you. I think the likes of shifts like data mesh have really helped to kind of bring more focus to that. And obviously data mesh is kind of the latest attempt at making that whole cloud data management thing sort of work. We've had data warehouse and data lakes and data lake house, somewhere in between. I will provide definitions for all of this, guys, so we've got a great link for that, so don't worry about that. But all of that, I think, is kind of not really, well, it's kind of worked for a while, but not really, as the rest of the technology maybe around the data and what's generating the data has changed. We've also had to change the management of data itself as well.
Go
ahead.
I agree with you. I think, but the real push has to be use the data once. So things like data lake houses, data lakes, whatever, almost is like using it twice or three times.
Well, it is, it is. Which I think is why probably data mesh came in and said, just keep your data domains. Don't worry about it. We'll secure it and govern it centrally, but we'll federate everything else.
Now I'll challenge that, because data mesh is not central management. It's data fabric is central management.
Okay, all right. We may have to differ on that one. I have to agree to disagree on that one.
Data, we'll come back to that. I'll send you a Blur document that looks at the difference between data mesh and fabric.
Okay.
But data mesh is very definitely distributed, but it's distributed management as well. It's not, so it's keep everything in one place. It's very domain oriented. So they're looking at this in domains, whether that's a vertical, line of business domain or a group domain or whatever. whereas data fabric tends to be slightly more technology driven, but centralized way of looking at the management. If not, it still says keep the data where it is. Don't move the data into a data, into another data lake or another data warehouse. Use it, you can use it for both transactions and analysis, data analysis.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that'll be an interesting debate: data fabric versus data mesh. We're gonna have that debate. But I'll send you the blur document on that one of our data analysts wrote, which I think is quite illuminating, and it's sort of helped me as I talk to companies about data. But
interesting. Yeah. Okay. Did he talk to Copilot at all about that? Because Copilot, I think, disagrees, but that is something we'll pick up on, and I will include some information.
I will have to go and ask Copilot, because I asked a real person.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, all right. So let's see. Okay. So let's see. Let's see what happens with that. So, like I said, I think I agreed with all of those sort of points, and I did pick up on a lot of other sort of areas we've seen, for example, around data charges being dropped, the egress charges being dropped by all three public cloud providers. So all top three cloud providers, cloud service providers, so Amazon, Google, and Microsoft have dropped all of their sort of charges. And I guess this is an element that cloud has now sort of brought in, and for us to again, be an ongoing concern, right, in terms of kind of egress charges and storing your data in the cloud and things like that. So maybe in the data center, maybe we didn't care about that. We just threw in another hard drive into the SAN or NAS that we have. But in the public clouds, it's different too, and you need to account for those things and have those as part of your cloud cost management or FinOps strategy, I guess.
Yeah, I can take a slightly cynical worldview of that, and them saying, actually, by the time you put all your data into our cloud, the chances of you moving significant amounts of that anywhere else, other than for transactional purposes, like having to move it down to a local transaction process of some kind, is probably pretty rare. I think early on it was a wonderful way of ensuring that people didn't ship it around, but there's so much data now. Our company is going to start thinking, hey, I can move my data wherever I wanted to move it. No, so they've probably gone, actually, it was giving us more PR problems than
yeah, probably. Okay, so I picked up on a few other points there. So the recent term that I've kind of seen being thrown around when I was at Cloud Expo Europe in London, and also the big data event in London as well. I saw the term data observability being thrown around, which I thought was quite interesting. I won't go into the details of it, but again, I saw a number of vendors who were actually talking about data observability. So that's another interesting one. Maybe that's more around the sort of the cloud data management aspect, but again, something we'll maybe explore in the future. Again, looking at all of this stuff, there was a lot of things around data labeling that's more interesting, around AI sort of workloads, I guess.
That's quality of data.
Yeah, exactly. Data architectures. Again, there's a battle around, as we said, data lakes and data warehouse, data lakehouse, data mesh, and data fabric, as you mentioned as well. So I think these are all interesting. We need to go back to the 4 stages of data migration chart that I shared with you a while back. I think that's something that we need to pick on. So maybe that can be our next sort of data discussion point, I guess, because that does kind of hit on the more practical, how do you migrate your data into the cloud? How do you migrate databases? How do you do data, which I think splits into 2 things. A database migration, which is kind of like for like, if you like, and maybe a database transformation, which takes you from an old type of database to a more modern type of data. So maybe from a RDBMS type of database into an unstructured type of database. So I think all of that, again, is part of part of that process.
That would be an interesting discussion, because obviously one of the things that we've seen is this proliferation of different types of databases now to deal with we've talked about them in the past, vector databases,
Vector databases, exactly.
databases, or literally, I think, hence the idea of a data architecture becomes really important, because you've got to start thinking about what the business is trying to do and how it's going to need to use its data and in what format it needs to be. So
yeah, indeed. Okay. Anything else from you on that topic? Was there?
No, I just wanted to put it out there as I think, it's sort of flown under the radar a little bit. The applications, and it was like the data is going to follow the applications. Well, we got news for you, boys. It's the data that's going to be driving this in the future.
Yeah, and it's not exactly a small thing that you can miss off your radar.
Well, surprising. It's surprising. We've moved from what I would have called the application age to the data age.
Yeah, I would say that it hasn't been a big consideration and factor, but I think it now definitely needs to be. If it wasn't before, it now definitely needs to be.
People had a wrong idea about data. They wanted information. Yes, that's fine, but what they didn't realize was the important role that data played in delivering decent information. Oh, I've got all the data I need, I just need better information. No, you don't. You need better data. But
Indeed.
We can argue that one later.
Indeed. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.